The rifle shot cracked like thunder across the dusty main street of Willow Creek, stopping Beatrice Lawson in her tracks. She clutched her reticule to her chest, her heart pounding beneath her fashionable traveling suit as the bullet splintered the wooden post not 3 inches from where she stood. Welcome to the West, indeed. It was 1879, and Beatrice had never intended to set foot in this God-forsaken territory. A woman of 24 years with a proper Boston education and ambitions that stretched far beyond the frontier, she had been perfectly content with her life in Philadelphia. Teaching at Miss Wellington's Academy for Young Ladies had provided her with stability, culture, and the refined society she craved. But father's passing and the subsequent discovery of his gambling debts had changed everything. "Madam, you'd best get inside," a gruff voice called out. Beatrice turned to see a tall figure on horseback, dust swirling around him as he approached at a gallop. The man swung down from his mount with practiced ease, grabbed her elbow, and guided her toward the shelter of the general store's awning as another shot rang out. "Beg your pardon for the handling," he said, releasing her arm once they were safely against the building's facade. "But Jed Wilson and Frank Barton are settling a dispute, and they ain't particular about innocent bystanders." Beatrice straightened her hat, which had gone slightly askew in the commotion. "Is this how disputes are commonly resolved in this town?" she asked, unable to keep the disdain from her voice. The man's face crinkled into a smile beneath the brim of his worn Stetson. "Only on Tuesdays," he replied, his blue eyes twinkling with amusement. "I'm Tucker Everett, own the Triple E Ranch just north of here." "Beatrice Lawson," she replied stiffly, extending her gloved hand. "I've just arrived on the afternoon stage." "Figured as much," he said, taking her hand briefly. "You're dressed too fine for these parts. You visiting family?" "I'm the new schoolteacher," she said, lifting her chin slightly. "Though I'm beginning to question the wisdom of my acceptance." Tucker's expression brightened. "The schoolteacher. Well, that's something the town's been needing. The children have been running wild since Miss Winters left to marry her sweetheart in Denver." A final shot echoed, followed by cheers and groans from the impromptu audience that had gathered to watch the dispute. "Looks like it's over," Tucker said, peering down the street. "Frank's down, but I reckon Doc Powell will patch him up. Nothing fatal from the looks of it." "How reassuring," Beatrice remarked dryly. "Is there someone who might direct me to my accommodations? I was told arrangements had been made." "That'd be with Widow Cooper, I expect. Her boarding house is the only decent place in town for a lady. I'd be happy to escort you there myself." Beatrice hesitated. This rough-hewn cowboy with his easy manner and sun-weathered face was nothing like the gentleman she was accustomed to in Philadelphia. Yet there was something undeniably trustworthy about him. "That would be acceptable, Mr. Everett. Thank you." Tucker loaded her trunks onto his wagon, having retrieved them from the stage office, and helped her climb up to the seat beside him. As they made their way down the rutted main street, Beatrice took in her new surroundings with growing dismay. Willow Creek consisted of little more than 24 buildings, most constructed of raw timber, with a few brick structures attempting to lend an air of permanence to the frontier settlement. "It's not much to look at," Tucker admitted, seeming to read her thoughts, "but it's growing. We've got the railroad coming through next year and talk of a proper courthouse. How many children will I be teaching?" she asked, trying to focus on the purpose that had brought her to this dusty corner of the Montana territory. "About 20, ranging from 6 to 16. Good kids, mostly. Some of the ranch hands' children ride in from miles around, including from your ranch," Tucker chuckled. "No little Everetts running around yet. Haven't found the right woman to settle down with." He glanced at her, then quickly returned his attention to the road. "What brings a city lady like yourself out to these parts? Teaching positions in Philadelphia must be plentiful." Beatrice twisted her hands in her lap. "My circumstances changed. The advertisement promised room and board plus a modest salary. It seemed a practical solution to my situation." Tucker nodded, not pressing further. "Well, here we are. Widow Cooper runs a tight ship, but she's fair and her cooking's better than anything you'd find elsewhere in town." The boarding house was a 2-story white clapboard building with green shutters and a welcoming porch. It stood in stark contrast to the saloon across the street, where raucous laughter and piano music already spilled into the late afternoon air. Widow Cooper turned out to be a robust woman in her 50s with shrewd eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. She showed Beatrice to a small but clean room on the second floor with a window overlooking a kitchen garden. "Supper's at 6 sharp," the widow informed her. "Breakfast at 7. You're welcome to pack a lunch from the leftovers. Bath day is Saturday, but you can have a basin of water brought up anytime you need it." When they were alone again, Tucker tipped his hat. "The schoolhouse is just down at the end of Oak Street. If you'd like, I can come by tomorrow and show you around town properly." Beatrice was about to decline when she realized that having a guide who knew the area might be beneficial. "That would be helpful, Mr. Everett, thank you." He smiled, and something fluttered in her chest that she quickly attributed to exhaustion from her journey. "Tucker," he corrected. "Folks around here don't stand on ceremony much." "Tucker then," she conceded. "Tomorrow." After he departed, Beatrice sat on the edge of her narrow bed and fought back tears. The reality of her situation was sinking in. This wild place with its gunfights and dusty streets was so far removed from the elegant drawing rooms and cultured conversations she had known. How would she survive a year here, let alone build a new life? She unpacked her few treasured books, Shakespeare, Emerson, and her favorite novel by George Eliot, placing them carefully on the small shelf above the writing desk. Then she withdrew a sealed envelope containing her father's last letter and the deed to a small plot of land somewhere in the territory, his final bequest, and the reason she had chosen Montana over other teaching positions. According to her father's letter, the land had been won in a poker game years ago and might be worthless, or it might contain valuable minerals. Either way, it was all she had left of him, and she intended to at least see it before deciding whether to sell. Supper that evening was a simple but hearty affair, shared with the boarding house's 3 other residents: Mr. Jenkins, an elderly accountant who worked at the bank; Miss Perkins, a spinster who operated the telegraph office; and Dr. Howard, a serious young physician newly arrived from Chicago. The conversation centered around town gossip and the upcoming Founders' Day celebration, neither of which held much interest for Beatrice, but she nodded politely and tried to appear engaged. That night, lying in the unfamiliar bed, Beatrice listened to the strange sounds of the frontier town distant coyotes, the occasional burst of laughter from the saloon, the wind whistling through cracks in the window frame. She had never felt so far from home, so displaced. Sleep came fitfully, punctuated by dreams of Philadelphia's gaslit streets and the life she had lost. True to his word, Tucker arrived the following morning. Beatrice had dressed in one of her simpler outfits, a blue cotton dress with white piping that she hoped would be practical for the dusty streets, but she still felt overdressed compared to the women she had seen in town. "Good morning, Miss Lawson," Tucker greeted her, his voice warm with genuine pleasure at seeing her again. Today, he had traded his working clothes for a clean shirt and vest, though his boots still bore the marks of ranch life. "Good morning, Mr. Tucker," she corrected herself, accepting his offered arm as they set off down the street. Their tour began with the schoolhouse, a modest building with a bell tower and enough desks for about 30 students. The interior was dusty and clearly in need of a woman's touch, but Beatrice could see its potential. Next came the church, the mercantile, the bank, and finally the small building that housed both the town's newspaper and its minuscule lending library. "It's not much compared to Philadelphia's libraries, I'm sure," Tucker said apologetically as Beatrice examined the 3 shelves of well-worn books. "No, it isn't," she agreed, "but it's a start. Perhaps I can write to some of my former colleagues for donations." Throughout the morning, Beatrice was struck by how everyone they encountered greeted Tucker with genuine respect and affection. He knew every person by name, inquired after family members, and offered assistance with various matters. It was clear he was well regarded in the community. "You seem to have quite an influence here," she observed as they left the general store, where Tucker had arranged for a slate and chalk to be ordered for the schoolhouse. He shrugged modestly. "My father was one of the first settlers in the area. Built the triple E from nothing. People tend to remember that sort of thing. At the mention of land, Beatrice remembered her father's deed. Tucker, I wonder if you might help me with something. My father left me a parcel of land somewhere in the territory, but I'm not certain exactly where it's located. His eyebrows rose in surprise. You own land here. That's unexpected. Do you have the deed? It's at the boarding house. Perhaps you could look at it this afternoon. Happy to, he agreed. Land out here can be valuable depending on water rights and such. Their final stop was the sheriff's office, where they found a burly man with a silver-streaked beard cleaning a shotgun. Sheriff Holloway, this is Miss Beatrice Lawson, our new schoolteacher, Tucker introduced. The sheriff set aside his weapon and stood, extending a hand. Pleased to meet you, madam. My youngest, Emma, will be in your class. Bright as a new penny but stubborn as her mother, God rest her soul. I look forward to meeting her, Beatrice said politely. As they left, Tucker suggested they stop for lunch at the hotel dining room, which he assured her served the best food in town aside from Widow Cooper's. Over a simple meal of beef stew and fresh bread, Beatrice found herself relaxing in Tucker's company. Despite his frontier manners and occasional colorful language, he was surprisingly well informed about current events and even literature. You seem surprised that I can quote Thoreau, he remarked with amusement when she couldn't hide her reaction to his reference. I apologize if I gave that impression, she said, feeling her cheeks warm. I suppose I didn't expect a cowboy to read. His smile was free of offense. My mother was a schoolteacher before she married my father. She made sure I had books growing up, even if they had to be ordered from back east. She sounds like a remarkable woman. She was, he said, a shadow crossing his face. Lost her 5 years ago to pneumonia. I'm sorry, Beatrice said softly. My mother passed when I was 14. It's a difficult loss to bear. For a moment, they sat in companionable silence, connected by shared grief. Tell me about Philadelphia, Tucker said eventually. I've never been farther east than St. Louis. Beatrice found herself describing the city she loved: its tree-lined streets, elegant architecture, the museums and theaters, the intellectual gatherings where ideas flowed as freely as the tea. As she spoke, a familiar ache of longing filled her chest. You miss it, Tucker observed. Very much, she admitted. This place is so different. Different doesn't always mean worse, he said gently. Just takes some getting used to. Later that afternoon, Tucker examined her father's deed while they sat on the boarding house porch, his brow furrowed as he studied the document. Well, I'll be damned, excuse my language, he said, looking up with astonishment. This property borders my ranch to the east. It's about 500 acres of decent grazing land with a small creek running through it. Beatrice stared at him. Are you certain? Positive. Your father won this from Jeb Wilson, old Jed's father, back in '65 according to the date. Jeb always claimed he was cheated, but he was a notorious liar. Tucker handed the deed back to her. It's worth something, Miss Lawson, not a fortune, but it could fetch a good price if you wanted to sell. I need to see it first, she said, still processing this unexpected news. I'd be happy to take you out there this weekend if you'd like. It's about an hour's ride from town. The invitation was tempting, but Beatrice hesitated. Propriety demanded a chaperone for such an excursion, yet she was eager to see this unexpected inheritance. Perhaps Mrs. Cooper might accompany us, she suggested. Tucker grinned. The widow's never been fond of horses, but my foreman's wife, Maria, could join us. She's a fine woman, raised 6 children, and proper as they come. The arrangement was made, and Beatrice spent the rest of the week preparing for her first day of teaching. The schoolhouse required thorough cleaning, and she developed a curriculum based on the books available, and her assessment of what the children would need to learn. Throughout it all, thoughts of Tucker Everett and her mysterious property kept intruding on her concentration. There was something about the cowboy's quiet confidence and kind eyes that unsettled her. He wasn't at all what she had expected to find in this rough frontier town. His intelligence and thoughtfulness belied his rugged exterior, and she found herself looking forward to their planned excursion with an eagerness that went beyond mere curiosity about her land. Saturday dawned clear and crisp, with the promise of warmth later in the day. Beatrice dressed practically in her sturdiest skirt and a shirtwaist that could withstand dust and wind. Tucker arrived promptly at 9 with an extra horse, a gentle mare named Daisy, and accompanied by a plump, cheerful Mexican woman he introduced as Maria Gonzalez. "Miss Beatrice, it is a pleasure," Maria said warmly. "Tucker tells me you are from the big city in the east. You must find our little town very quiet." "It's certainly different," Beatrice acknowledged, taking an immediate liking to the woman's friendly manner. Tucker helped Beatrice mount Daisy, his strong hands steady at her waist as he lifted her into the saddle. The brief contact sent an unexpected shiver through her, which she quickly attributed to nervousness about riding. "Have you ridden before?" he asked, adjusting the stirrups for her. "A little in the park in Philadelphia, nothing like this," he nodded reassuringly. "Daisy will take good care of you. Just follow my lead and tell me if you need to stop." The ride out of town took them along a well-traveled road before turning onto a narrower trail that wound through stands of pine and aspen. Maria chatted companionably about her family and life at the Triple E, where her husband had worked for 15 years. "Tucker is a good boss," she confided to Beatrice. "Fair with his men and generous too. He helped my oldest boy get into school in Denver, paid for everything." Beatrice glanced at Tucker riding ahead of them, his broad shoulders and straight back creating a striking silhouette against the landscape. There was more to this cowboy than met the eye, it seemed. As they crested a small rise, Tucker reined in his horse and waited for them to catch up. "Your land starts just beyond that line of cottonwoods," he told Beatrice, pointing to a cluster of trees about a quarter-mile away. "Follows the creek down to where it joins with the larger stream on my property." They rode on, crossing a shallow ford and entering Beatrice's property. The land opened before them, rolling grassland dotted with wildflowers, the silver ribbon of the creek winding through it, and in the distance, a breathtaking view of the mountains. "It's beautiful," Beatrice whispered, unexpected emotion tightening her throat. Tucker nodded, his expression solemn. "Good land. Your father chose well, even if it was at a card table." They dismounted near the creek, and Maria spread a blanket for their picnic lunch. As they ate the simple meal of cold chicken, bread, and early apples, Beatrice found her gaze continually drawn to the stunning vistas surrounding them. The sky seemed impossibly vast, stretching from horizon to horizon in a brilliant blue expanse. "I've never seen anything like this," she admitted, taking in the panoramic view. "In Philadelphia, the buildings block most of the sky." "That's the thing about the West," Tucker said quietly. "It shows you how big the world really is. Makes a person feel small and big at the same time, if that makes sense." It did, strangely enough. Beatrice felt simultaneously humbled by the landscape's grandeur and expanded by it, as if her spirit had more room to breathe here. After lunch, Tucker suggested they explore a bit further, and Maria volunteered to stay with the horses and take a siesta in the shade. "There's a nice viewpoint just up that rise," Tucker said, offering Beatrice his hand to help her over some rocky ground. "You can see clear to the mountains from there." The climb was steeper than it looked, and Beatrice was grateful for Tucker's steady support. When they reached the top, the view literally took her breath away. The land spread out below them in a tapestry of greens and golds, with the distant mountains sharp against the sky. "Oh," was all she could say, one hand pressed to her heart. Tucker smiled at her reaction. "Pretty special, isn't it? I had no idea." She began, then trailed off, unable to articulate the feelings welling up inside her. "That the West could be beautiful," he finished for her. She nodded, slightly embarrassed by her preconceptions. "I thought it would all be dust and danger." "We've got plenty of both," he acknowledged with a chuckle. "But there's more to it than that. There's freedom here, Beatrice, room to breathe, room to become whoever you want to be, not just who others expect." The use of her given name, spoken with such quiet intensity, made her heart skip. She turned to face him fully, struck by how the sunlight brought out golden highlights in his brown hair and deepened the blue of his eyes. "Is that why you stay?" she asked. "For the freedom," Tucker looked thoughtful. "Partly, but mostly because this is home. My roots are here, deep as those cottonwoods by the creek." He paused, then added softly, though I reckon home isn't always a place. Sometimes it's people. The moment stretched between them, charged with something Beatrice wasn't ready to name. She broke eye contact first, turning back to the view. I should probably sell the land, she said practically. I have no use for it, and the money would help me get established somewhere more civilized. If she expected Tucker to argue, he surprised her. It's your decision, he said simply. But I'd be happy to make you an offer if you decide to sell. It would round out my eastern grazing lands nicely. On the ride back to town, Beatrice found herself less focused on the discomfort of the saddle and more aware of the beauty surrounding her. The late afternoon light gilded the landscape, and when a herd of deer bounded across their path, she gasped in delight at the graceful creatures. City folk pay good money to see sights like that in traveling shows, Tucker remarked with a smile. Out here, it's just another Saturday. That evening, as Beatrice prepared for bed, she found her thoughts continually returning to the day's experiences, not just the magnificent vistas and wildlife, but Tucker's words about freedom and home. She had come to Montana seeing it only as a temporary necessity, a stepping stone back to civilization. But was it possible there was something valuable here beyond the monetary worth of her land? Monday brought the start of the school term, and Beatrice found herself too busy to dwell on such philosophical questions. Her 23 students ranged from shy 6-year-old twins to a gangly 16-year-old boy who clearly resented being in school at all. The challenges of teaching multiple grade levels simultaneously, with limited resources, demanded all her skill and energy. Yet she found unexpected satisfaction in the work. These frontier children were hungry for knowledge in a way her Philadelphia students had never been. They understood intuitively that education might be their ticket to a different life, and most applied themselves with diligence that touched her deeply. As the weeks passed, Beatrice settled into a rhythm. Weekdays were devoted to teaching, evenings to preparation and grading. On Saturdays, she often found herself accepting invitations from Tucker to attend a barn raising, to join a community picnic, or simply to ride out to her property again, always with the proper chaperonage of Maria or another respectable matron. With each outing, Beatrice discovered more to appreciate about the Montana territory. The brilliant autumn colors that transformed the landscape, the way stars blazed against the night sky with an intensity she had never witnessed in the city. The genuine warmth of the townspeople who, despite their rough edges, looked out for one another in ways her Philadelphia acquaintances never had. And then there was Tucker himself. The more time she spent in his company, the more layers she discovered beneath his cowboy exterior. He read voraciously, maintained correspondence with former classmates at St. Louis University, and held thoughtful opinions on everything from politics to poetry. Yet he was equally at home breaking horses, mending fences, or helping a neighboring ranch with their cattle drive. "You're a contradiction, Tucker Everett," she told him one crisp October afternoon as they walked back from visiting an ailing student. "How does a man with your education and intellect choose this life?" He considered her question seriously before answering. "I had opportunities to stay east after college. My mother's brother offered me a position in his law firm. But this land," he gestured to the open country around them, "it gets in your blood. The challenges are real and immediate. Build a fence, it keeps the cattle in. Break a horse, you can ride it tomorrow. The rewards are just as tangible. And the isolation doesn't bother you, the lack of cultural stimulation." Tucker's eyes crinkled with amusement. "We may not have grand opera houses, but we make our own culture. Music, storytelling, dances." As for isolation, his voice softened. "I've never felt lonely here the way I did surrounded by crowds in St. Louis." His words stayed with Beatrice that night, prompting her to examine her own assumptions. She had always believed that civilization and culture were synonymous, that the refinements of city life represented the pinnacle of human achievement. Yet there was a genuineness to life here, a directness in human relationships that she had rarely experienced in Philadelphia society. The following weekend brought the Founders' Day celebration, a community-wide event featuring races, contests, a potluck dinner, and dancing under the stars. Beatrice found herself swept up in the preparations, helping her students practice a recitation for the occasion and baking pies with Widow Cooper's guidance. The day itself dawned perfect, cool but sunny, with aspen leaves shimmering gold against an azure sky. The entire town gathered in the meadow beside the church, with blankets spread for picnicking and booths set up for various competitions. Children ran races while adults competed in everything from horseshoe throwing to quilting displays. Tucker found Beatrice shortly after noon, looking particularly handsome in a clean shirt with a brocade vest and his best Stetson. "Miss Lawson," he greeted her with a tip of his hat. "Your students did you proud with their recitation." "Thank you," she replied, pleased by the compliment. "They worked very hard. I was wondering if you might save a dance for me this evening," he said, a hint of uncertainty in his usually confident manner. "I would like that," she answered, surprising herself with how much she meant it. The afternoon passed in a blur of activity and laughter. Beatrice found herself participating in events she would never have considered in Philadelphia, a pie-eating contest, which she lost spectacularly to Dr. Howard, a three-legged race paired with Emma Holloway, which they won, and even an impromptu singing competition where she contributed a rather wobbly rendition of Beautiful Dreamer. As dusk fell, lanterns were lit around the perimeter of the dancing area, and the town's small band consisting of a fiddle, banjo, guitar, and harmonica struck up a lively tune. Couples took to the wooden platform that served as a dance floor, from silver-haired elders to giggling teenagers. True to his word, Tucker appeared at Beatrice's side for the first waltz. His hand was warm at her waist as he guided her into the dance, his movements surprisingly graceful for a man who spent most of his days on horseback. "You dance well," she observed, looking up at him. "My mother insisted I learn, said no son of hers would stomp around a dance floor like a wounded buffalo." Beatrice laughed, relaxing into his lead. "She was a wise woman. She would have liked you," he said quietly. Something in his tone made her pulse quicken. "Would she?" "Very much. She always valued education and refinement, but she had grit too, like you." "I'm not sure I've demonstrated much grit," Beatrice demurred. Tucker's hand tightened slightly at her waist. "Haven't you, coming all this way alone, taking on a classroom of wild frontier children? Riding out to your land even though you were clearly terrified the first time?" "I wasn't terrified," she protested automatically. His knowing smile told her he wasn't fooled. "Your knuckles were white on the reins." She conceded with a small laugh, perhaps a little nervous. They danced in comfortable silence for a moment, the music swelling around them. Beatrice was acutely aware of Tucker's proximity, of the clean scent of his shaving soap and the solid strength of his shoulder beneath her hand. "Beatrice," he said softly, "I've been meaning to ask, have you decided what to do about your land?" The question caught her off guard. She had been postponing the decision, telling herself she needed more time to consider her options. "Not yet," she admitted. "Though winter will be here soon, and I suppose I should resolve the matter before then." The music ended, and Tucker reluctantly released her. "No rush," he said. "Just curious." They were separated by the flow of the celebration after that Beatrice claimed for dances by Dr. Howard and Mr. Jenkins, while Tucker partnered with various ladies of the community. But throughout the evening, Beatrice found her gaze drawn to him repeatedly, and more often than not, she discovered him watching her too. As the night deepened and families with young children began to depart, the mood of the gathering shifted. The music slowed, and couples danced closer together. The older chaperones dozed in their chairs or were escorted home, leaving a less vigilant atmosphere. Tucker approached Beatrice again as the band began a slower waltz. "One more dance?" he asked, his voice husky in the lantern light. She nodded, moving into his arms with less hesitation than before. This time he held her slightly closer, their bodies occasionally brushing as they turned. The contact sent shivers of awareness through her that had nothing to do with the cooling night air. "Cold?" he asked, noticing her slight tremor. "No," she answered honestly, meeting his gaze. Something changed in his expression then, a softening, a vulnerability she hadn't seen before. "Beatrice," he began, then seemed to think better of whatever he had been about to say. Yes, she prompted. Tucker glanced around at the remaining revelers, then back at her. Would you walk with me? Just to the edge of the meadow, it's a clear night. The propriety ingrained by years in Philadelphia society urged caution, but another part of her, a part that had been growing stronger during her months in Willow Creek, wanted to accept. Just for a moment, she agreed. They slipped away from the dancing, Tucker grabbing a lantern as they went. At the meadow's edge, he set the light on a stump and gestured upward. Look. Beatrice tilted her head back and gasped. The night sky was ablaze with stars, thousands upon thousands of them, more than she had ever seen, even during her visits to her property. The Milky Way stretched like a celestial river across the heavens, and occasional shooting stars streaked bright paths against the darkness. It's magnificent, she breathed. Tucker stood close beside her, his presence warm in the cool night. In the city, you can't see them like this, can you? The stars? No, she admitted. The gas lamps and coal smoke obscure all but the brightest. That seems a terrible loss, he said softly, to live without being able to see the stars properly. Beatrice turned to look at him, struck by the earnestness in his voice. In the lantern's glow, his features were cast in gentle shadows, his eyes reflecting pinpoints of starlight. I never missed them, she said. Before coming here, I never knew what I wasn't seeing. Tucker took her hand then, his calloused fingers entwining with hers. There's a lot like that, isn't there? Things we don't miss until we experience them. The double meaning in his words was unmistakable, and Beatrice felt her heart accelerate. They stood at a crossroads, she realized, not just in this conversation, but in her entire future. Tucker, she said, her voice barely above a whisper, I've been thinking about my land. His expression became carefully neutral. And I don't think I want to sell it. Hope flared in his eyes. You don't? No, she took a deep breath. I think I might want to build on it someday. Tucker stepped closer, one hand coming up to gently touch her cheek. Beatrice Lawson, are you saying you might stay in Montana territory? She leaned slightly into his touch. I'm saying I'm not as certain as I once was that my future lies in the city. It was enough of an opening. Tucker bent his head and kissed her tentatively at first, then with growing confidence as she responded. His lips were warm and firm against hers, his arms strong as they encircled her waist. Beatrice found herself returning the kiss with an eagerness that would have shocked her Philadelphia acquaintances. When they finally parted, both a little breathless, Tucker rested his forehead against hers. I've been wanting to do that since the day you arrived in town, he confessed. Even with my city airs and obvious disdain, she teased, especially with those, he chuckled. You were like a princess dropped into our rough little kingdom, beautiful and proper and completely out of place. And now, his expression grew serious. Now you're still beautiful, but you belong here, Beatrice. You've put down roots without even realizing it. Your students adore you. The town respects you. And he paused, gathering courage, I've fallen in love with you. The declaration should have alarmed her with its swiftness, yet it felt right as natural and inevitable as the changing seasons. In the months since her arrival, Tucker Everett had become the person she most looked forward to seeing, the one whose opinion mattered most, whose company brought her the greatest joy. I think I've fallen in love with you too, she admitted softly, though I've been trying very hard not to. He laughed, the sound rich with happiness. Why fight it? Because loving you means choosing this life, this place. It means giving up my dreams of returning to civilization. Tucker's hands tightened at her waist. Is that still what you want, to go back east? Beatrice looked up at the star-studded sky, then around at the wild, beautiful land stretching in all directions. Finally, she looked at Tucker himself, solid, dependable, intelligent, kind. A man of both worlds who had chosen this one for reasons she was beginning to understand. No, she said, surprising herself with the certainty she felt. I used to think I needed museums and theaters and literary salons to be happy, but these months here have shown me there's culture and beauty in simpler things too, in watching a child's face light up with understanding, in seeing a sunset paint the mountains gold, in building something meaningful with your own hands. We could build something meaningful together, Tucker suggested, his voice husky with emotion. A life. A home, a family if you want that. The future unfurled before Beatrice's imagination, not a return to Philadelphia's drawing rooms, but a new path she hadn't considered before. A home on her land, perhaps, with windows facing the mountains. Children with Tucker's blue eyes and her love of books. Summers spent exploring the wilderness, winters gathered around a hearth sharing stories. It wouldn't be the life she had planned, but it might be richer in ways that mattered more. "I think I would like that very much," she whispered. Their second kiss was deeper, a promise sealed beneath the vast Montana sky. When they finally returned to the dwindling celebration, hand in hand, Beatrice knew that decisions had been made that couldn't be unmade, and she had no desire to reverse them. The following spring, as wildflowers carpeted the meadows and new calves wobbled beside their mothers, Beatrice Lawson became Beatrice Everett in a simple ceremony at the Willow Creek Church. Her students formed an honor guard, strewing flower petals as she walked down the aisle in a gown of ivory, silk her one concession to Eastern fashion. By summer, construction had begun on their home, a sturdy ranch house straddling the boundary between Tucker's land and Beatrice's, symbolizing the union of their lives. It wasn't as grand as the Philadelphia townhouse she had once dreamed of, but its wide porches and large windows embraced the landscape she had come to love. As for Beatrice herself, she continued teaching, but also embraced her role as a rancher's wife with surprising enthusiasm. She learned to ride with confidence, to garden in the challenging climate, even to shoot, though she hoped never to need that skill. In the evenings, she and Tucker read aloud to each other from their growing library, debating ideas and sharing dreams. And on clear nights, they often sat together on their porch, looking up at the stars that blazed with unparalleled brilliance in the Montana sky. Beatrice would rest her head on Tucker's shoulder, marveling at how completely her perspective had changed. She had come west believing she belonged in the city, that civilization required gaslit streets and brick buildings. But Tucker had shown her that true civilization existed wherever people built lives of meaning and purpose, wherever they found beauty and love, even in the wild heart of the frontier. And the stars, she had discovered, were more than enough.